Have you ever felt like you're living a life that isn't really yours? Like you're wearing a mask, smiling at the right times, saying the right things, yet deep inside, there's a silence that feels out of place? Strange, isn't it? Most people go through their entire lives without ever truly becoming themselves. They wake up, put on the costume of duty and expectation, and call it life. But if the Stoics knew one thing for certain, it's this: real strength doesn't come from conquering the world, it comes from understanding yourself. In stillness, in honesty, in every breath that doesn't need to be explained. In the quietest chambers of the human soul lies a mystery so profound. It has captivated philosophers and psychologists for generations: the question of authentic existence. What does it truly mean to be yourself in a world that constantly pressures you to be someone else? You know what's wild? Most people will go their entire lives without ever answering that question. They'll wake up each day, wear a carefully crafted mask, go through the motions, and call it living. But somewhere inside, there's a quiet ache. Not because they're broken, just buried. Not because they're weak, only taught to doubt their own strength. The world trained you to trade truth for approval. To stay silent, just to keep the peace. To abandon what's real in exchange for what's acceptable. But here's the truth no one tells you. Your greatest power doesn't exist somewhere out there. It's already inside you, waiting to be remembered. The Stoics believed that peace isn't found in controlling the world, but in mastering your response to it. That real strength doesn't scream, it stands still. Stoicism isn't about being cold or emotionless. It's about being unshakable, deeply anchored, even when the world around you spins in chaos. And in today's noisy, performative, hollow society, the person who chooses authenticity over approval, silence over noise, truth over comfort, is the one who truly stands tall. But that's just the beginning, because there's something else, something quiet, yet powerful, that we're about to uncover. And what happens when someone dares to live that truth? What emerges is a rare kind of power, quiet, unwavering, magnetic. This video isn't some surface-level pep talk. It isn't fake it till you make it. It's something deeper. It's about remembering the truth that life, in its noise and distractions, has tried to make you forget. You were never powerless. You were simply pulled away. You got caught in the current. Responsibilities piled up. Voices told you who to be. And little by little, you stopped hearing your own. But if something in these words feels like it's speaking directly to the part of you that's been waiting to be seen, if you feel like you're not alone in this, if these moments bring you back to a knowing you've always had, but maybe stopped trusting, then I have a small request. No pressure, no hype. Just a quiet invitation. Hit that subscribe button. It helps us grow this space, a home for people who are done pretending. People who are done with the noise. People who are ready to live with clarity, with courage, and with a kind of strength that doesn't go out of style. Have you ever found yourself drifting through the day? Doing everything that needs to be done, but still feeling like something's missing? Like life's gotten so packed, so loud, so predictable, that somewhere in all that noise, you disappeared. There's the job, the obligations. People expecting you to play your part. And over time, without realizing it, you started living from the outside in. Letting pressure shape you more than purpose ever could. Let's slow that down. Not just your pace, but your perception. Because underneath all of it, the titles, the routines, the masks, the swallowed words. There's someone you may not have met in a long time. You. And I'm not talking about the version of you that the world sees. I'm talking about the one that still exists when no one's looking. The one who doesn't need applause to feel real. The one who still remembers what it feels like to be whole. The Stoics had a name for this kind of power. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, said it simply: man conquers the world by conquering himself. That truth hasn't changed. Because real strength isn't about controlling everything around you. It's about mastering the one thing that truly matters, yourself. And if that feels like something you're ready to reclaim. So what does it really mean to master yourself, like the Stoics believed? It doesn't begin in the gym. It doesn't begin on some stage or in front of a crowd. It starts quietly. It starts in the mind. It begins the moment you stop trying to impress the world. And start being honest with yourself. Because here's the truth most people avoid. You can't fix what you haven't faced. And you can't face what you've never acknowledged. It's easier to keep moving, faster, busier, louder, than to pause and look inward. Because stillness can be terrifying. Sitting alone with your thoughts is like staring into a mirror that doesn't lie. And that mirror, unfiltered, quiet, real, isn't always easy to face. But it is the beginning. It is where your true power lives. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And yet, how many people actually take the time to do that? To sit with their own truth, not the edited version, but the raw one? Very few. Why? Because silence is uncomfortable. Because facing yourself means letting go of the masks, the roles, the performances. But that discomfort, it's a doorway. And on the other side of it? Freedom. Power. Peace. The world, meanwhile, is loud. It always has an idea of who you should be. Your job wants productivity. Your friends want the version of you they recognize. Social media wants perfection, shiny, filtered, flawless. And every time you shift yourself to meet those expectations, without pausing to ask, is this really me? You drift further away from your own center. You become what Carl Jung described as a persona. A mask we create for the world. A social performance shaped by approval and survival. But here's the warning Jung gave us. The more we identify with the persona, the more we lose touch with the authentic self beneath it. And once that authentic self goes quiet, we don't live. We perform. We survive instead of thrive. So, the question is no longer, who are you to the world? But rather, who are you when no one's watching? And that's exactly what we'll begin to uncover. So if we weren't born to perform, what were we born to do? Here's the truth. You weren't born to impress the world. You were born to live, fully, deeply, consciously. To move through life awake, aligned with your truth, and aware of your presence. But that kind of living? It doesn't happen by accident. It begins the moment you stop tuning out, and start tuning in. I know, it's not easy. Life is designed to distract you. Everything around us is built to keep us looking outward, scrolling, comparing, performing, reacting. But true power? It begins in the opposite direction. It begins the moment you turn down the noise, Not forever. Not perfectly. Just long enough to hear yourself again. So here's a starting point. Simple, clear, quiet. 15 minutes. That's it. No phone. No music. No screens. Just a blank page and a pen. Don't overthink it. You're not writing a novel. You're not writing to impress. You're not writing for anyone else. This is just for you. Ask yourself the questions that actually matter. What am I pretending not to feel? What part of me have I pushed away just to belong? What would my life look like if I stopped apologizing for being myself? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary ones. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And that's not a threat, it's a wake-up call. Because if you never pause to ask who you really are, you'll spend your whole life chasing someone else's definition of success. You'll climb and push and strive, only to realize that the ladder you were on was leaning against the wrong wall. But something beautiful happens when you begin to observe instead of perform. You start noticing what energizes you, and what silently drains you. You become aware of the small lies you've been living under. I'm not enough. I have to earn love. I need to keep everyone happy just to be safe. And when you finally see those stories for what they are, stories, not truth, you gain the power to rewrite them. That's the gift of awareness. It doesn't just heal. It transforms. Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." And that's exactly what this is. A challenge, yes. But also, a profound reward. Because self-awareness isn't just some overused self-help slogan. It's the root of discipline. The beginning of peace. The reason you stop breaking your own heart. And start building a life that's actually yours. And if that feels like a path worth walking, then what we explore next will take you even deeper. So, once you start building your real life, one rooted in awareness and truth, you'll begin to notice something else. Life starts sending you messages. You know those moments? When someone says something small, almost in passing, but it hits you like a freight train? Or when you find yourself in a situation that feels strangely familiar. Like you've been here before, just with different faces and slightly altered details. That's not coincidence. That's not just bad luck or a weird déjà vu. That's a sign. A reflection. A pattern. It's life holding up a mirror. A quiet but undeniable invitation to look inward. Because there's a part of you, a shadow, that you've likely tried to keep hidden. The part that feels like too much. Or maybe not enough. The part that still aches. From something that happened years ago. A wound you've tried to bury under success. Under busyness. Under forced smiles and polite conversations. It might be insecurity. Or jealousy. Or that quiet sadness you don't talk about. Whatever it is, you've tried to outrun it. But it's still there. Carl Jung called this place within us the shadow. And no, it's not just some abstract psychological theory. It's real. It's alive. And more often than we realize, it's steering the wheel. The Stoics knew this truth long before modern psychology put words to it. They didn't believe in only polishing the bright parts. They believed in facing the whole self. The raw, the painful, the parts we'd rather hide. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But that strength? It doesn't just come from mastering the calm. It also comes from being honest about the chaos. Even the parts of your mind that you've spent years avoiding, they count too. They matter. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. What you avoid doesn't disappear. It lingers. It festers. It finds other ways to express itself. Through anger. Through outbursts. Through choices that don't align with who you really are. And sooner or later, if not faced directly, it leaks out, messy, painful, and unexpected. But the good news is, you're not powerless against it. And that's exactly what we'll begin to explore. So once you begin to see what you've been avoiding, you can also begin to understand how it's been shaping you all along. Think about it. How many of your struggles aren't actually about the world, but about the stories you've been carrying? That nagging self-doubt. The way you sabotage things that matter to you. Those sharp reactions you wish you could take back. They're not just random personality traits. They're clues, pointing to something deeper. For example, if you find yourself constantly triggered by rejection, if a simple no from someone else feels like a personal collapse, it might not really be about them. It might be about an old wound. Something that was never seen, never healed. Something that still whispers, "You're not enough." And if no matter how much you do, how hard you work, how much praise you receive, you still feel like you're falling short, maybe it's because you've been chasing proof from the outside world, instead of learning how to validate yourself from the inside out. These patterns, they don't just happen to us. They come from within us. And once you understand that, once you stop pointing the finger outward, you begin to reclaim something powerful. Your choice. Because here's the shift most people never make. Your shadow isn't out to get you. It's not your enemy. It's a messenger. It's a teacher. It's not trying to destroy your peace. It's trying to reveal where fear has quietly been driving the car. Carl Jung put it this way. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, true growth, real wholeness, doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from being honest about what's hard to look at. Facing your shadow isn't about fixing yourself. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming whole. Let's say you always feel unappreciated. You go out of your way for others. You overextend. You give. And yet, you still end up feeling invisible, overlooked. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's a signal. A quiet, powerful signal, inviting you to pause and ask, why do I need others to validate me in order to feel okay? Where did I first learn that my worth depends on someone else's approval? Because maybe, just maybe, the real work isn't about getting others to finally see your value. Maybe the real work begins when you learn to see it for yourself. And that deeper, quieter work. That's exactly what we'll begin to uncover. So maybe it's not about waiting for someone else to finally see your worth. Maybe it's about learning how to see it yourself. Even in silence. Even when no one else is clapping. Even when the world feels still and uncertain. Because here's the thing. Pretending you're okay isn't healing. It's just another mask. And like Plato said, the worst form of injustice is pretended justice. When you pretend you've moved on. Pretend you're not still aching. Pretend that guilt, or fear, or resentment doesn't still live somewhere in your chest. You're not fooling anyone. You're just being unjust to yourself. Because healing can't grow where honesty has been pushed out. It needs truth. Gentle, raw, uncomfortable truth. To take root. So what can you actually do? You start small. Not with fixing everything. Not with rewriting your entire past. But with one emotion. Just one. Pick the one that keeps knocking at your door. Jealousy. Fear. Guilt. Resentment. Don't push it away. Don't judge it. Sit with it. Name it. Let it speak. Ask it. What are you trying to tell me? What are you protecting me from? That's not weakness. That's courage. Because most people spend a lifetime sprinting from what they feel. They drown it out. Numb it. Outperform it. But when you sit with it, when you stay in the room with your discomfort, something powerful happens. You break the cycle. Socrates once said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." And knowing your shadow, your pain, your triggers, your patterns, is a part of that. It's the line between reacting on impulse and responding with intention. Between projecting your pain onto others, and finally beginning to process it. This journey, it's not about fixing yourself. You're not broken. It's about reclaiming yourself, piece by piece. Because every part of you, even the ones you were told to suppress or hide, has something to say. Something valuable. Something deeply human. So the next time something cuts deep, when you feel that sting, that jolt, that reaction, don't brush it off. Don't gaslight yourself. Ask, where is this really coming from? What have I been avoiding? What truth have I been too afraid to face? Because the moment you meet your fear with honesty, not bravado, not denial, but real presence, it starts to lose its grip. You stop being a puppet to your past. You start becoming something new. The architect of your future. That's where real strength begins. Not in being perfect. Not in pretending nothing ever hurt. But in radical self-awareness. And the courage to own all of who you are. Even the parts you once thought made you unworthy. And here's a curious thing. Have you ever noticed how quickly we trust maps, apps, instructions? Everything outside of us, without hesitation. Yet when it comes to trusting ourselves, we freeze, we doubt, we hesitate. So why is it that we trust traffic signs, algorithms, and instruction manuals more easily than we trust ourselves? Because somewhere along the way, We were taught to silence the one voice that mattered most, our own. We ignore that little nudge in the gut. We brush off that quiet tension in the chest. We tell ourselves, it's nothing. But more often than not, it's everything. It's wild, really. Because that quiet, subtle feeling, that whisper from within, it's usually right. Yet we've been conditioned, by schools, systems, society, to believe that logic always wins over emotion. That if you can't explain something step by step, then it must not be valid, must not be real. But here's the truth. Intuition isn't fluff. It's not mysticism. It's not a sixth sense that only a few possess. It's ancient. It's rooted. It's real. Intuition is your built-in signal system, crafted from a lived experience, stored memory, emotional history, and subconscious awareness. It's not loud. It's not flashy. But it's precise. It's your compass. Not the one sold to you. Not the one shaped by trends, timelines, or external approval. The one woven into your bones. Now, the Stoics didn't use the word intuition the way we do today. But they understood it in essence. They valued inner knowing. The kind of wisdom that doesn't need to shout to be true. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And mastering yourself? It means learning to recognize when your inner world is trying to speak, even before your conscious mind fully understands it. That sudden moment when you walk into a room, and something just feels off. Or when you're about to say yes to something, but deep down, everything in you says no. That's not paranoia. That's not anxiety. That's information. It's your deeper self speaking, before your surface self catches up. Carl Jung understood this well. He named intuition as one of the 4 primary psychological functions, right alongside thinking, feeling, and sensing. He described it as perception via the unconscious. In simpler terms, intuition is how your inner world sees what your outer world hasn't yet noticed. And the more you ignore it, the harder life becomes to navigate. But when you start tuning in, truly listening, you begin to realize you were never lost. You just weren't listening to your own map. So what exactly is intuition, really? It's not irrational. It's not guesswork. It's not fantasy. It's pre-rational. Meaning, it comes before your logical mind even has a chance to catch up. It's faster than thought, because it draws from something deeper. Layers of knowledge and memory that your conscious brain hasn't fully processed yet. But your body and emotions already know. Think about it. How many times in your life have you sensed that something was off, but talked yourself out of it because it didn't make sense? Maybe it was that person who smiled too much, but something about their energy just didn't feel right. Or a job offer that looked amazing on paper, great salary, perfect title, yet made your stomach twist every time you thought about saying yes. Or a relationship that had all the right ingredients on the outside, but deep inside, something told you, this won't end well. And later, maybe weeks, maybe years, the truth finally surfaced. And you realized your gut had known it all along. Long before your logical mind could catch up. That's intuition in motion. Plato once said, "All learning has an emotional base." What does that mean? It means your body and emotions are always picking up on things. Signals, patterns, tones, inconsistencies, far faster than your brain can categorize or explain them. You don't need a chart or a checklist to know something's off. You don't need permission to trust that feeling in your chest or that tension in your gut. You just need to listen. You just need to trust yourself. But here's the hard truth. We live in a world that trains us, systematically, to distrust our inner voice. We're taught to be polite instead of honest. To be agreeable instead of self-aware. To keep the peace, even when something inside us is screaming. And every single time we override that instinct. Every time we smile when we want to speak up. Say yes when everything in us says no. Or tell ourselves I'm overreacting when we're not. We chip away at that internal trust. That sacred connection between who we are and what we know. But here's the good news. That connection, it's not gone. It's just been buried under years of noise and second guessing. So what happens after years of overriding our intuition? We become skilled at something we were never meant to master. Pleasing others more than protecting ourselves. We become experts at smiling when we're uncomfortable. At staying quiet when we want to speak. At pushing our own truth aside just to avoid rocking the boat. And yet, thousands of years ago, Socrates posed a challenge so simple, yet so radical. Know thyself. That doesn't just mean knowing your opinions or your goals. It means recognizing the quiet hum of your own intuition. Those inner signals most of us have learned to ignore. It's not just about identifying your thoughts. It's about tuning into the subtler cues. The tightness in your chest when something feels off. The sudden tension in a conversation that seems pleasant on the surface. That faint but persistent buzz of discomfort that says, something's not right. And when you begin to notice those signals, really notice them, you realize something powerful. You always knew. You just didn't listen. But let's be clear. Listening doesn't mean panicking. It's not about jumping at every flicker of emotion. It's not about reacting to every wave of fear. It means pausing. Getting still. Getting curious. Asking, what exactly am I feeling right now? Where is this coming from? Is this true intuition? Or an old fear disguised as protection? Because that pause, that breath of presence between emotion and reaction, that is power. It's in that space that clarity begins. It's where wisdom lives. Aristotle once said, the aim of the wise is not to secure pleasure, but to avoid pain. And that's exactly what intuition is often trying to do. Not in a loud or dramatic way. Not with flashing neon warnings. But in the subtlest language there is. Gentle resistance. It shows up as the tension you can't quite name. The unease that lingers after a conversation. The hesitation that whispers, wait. Even when everything around you screams, go. And even if you can't fully explain it, even if it doesn't make logical sense, your body knows. Your inner self knows. Oh, once you start recognizing those quiet signals, what do you actually do with them? Here's the real move. Next time you get that gut feeling, pause. Not forever. not in fear. Just long enough to honor it. Don't rush to explain it away. Don't argue with it. Don't bury it beneath logic or noise or the need to be reasonable. Just sit with it. Observe. Breathe. Let it exist without immediately needing to justify it. Because that voice, that subtle pull in your body, that quiet whisper in your chest, it knows. It's operating on a timeline your thinking brain hasn't even caught up to yet. And if you're constantly shutting it down before it speaks, you're cutting off one of the most powerful tools you have. You don't need to convince anyone else that your intuition is valid. You don't have to make it logical for others. You just have to trust it enough to move when it whispers. That's not weakness. That's not irrational. That's what powerful people do. They don't wait until something falls apart. They don't wait for the betrayal to be proven. They don't wait for the crash before they hit the brakes. They sense. They adjust. They walk away. Not because something is broken, but because they feel it slipping away from peace. And in a world that constantly demands louder, faster, bolder, listening to your gut is an act of rebellion. It's a return to your own internal compass. Your own authority. Not one given to you by status, or success, or external validation, but the kind that comes from within. And here's what happens once you begin to trust it consistently. You stop explaining your energy. You stop justifying your discomfort. You stop negotiating with red flags. You stop asking for permission to leave what doesn't feel right. Instead, you move through life with this quiet confidence. It's not loud. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need approval. It only needs alignment. That's real strength. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that stays. And the truth is, you already have it. You always did. You just have to stop tuning it out. Stop ignoring the whisper. The whisper that's been trying to guide you. Gently but persistently. Because right beneath the surface, there's a deeper belief most of us carry. One that sneaks into everything we do. So what is that quiet whisper trying to warn you about? It's this. Somewhere along the line, you may have been tricked into believing that in order to be enough, you had to be approved of. Not by someone specific. Not even by someone who truly mattered. Just someone. Anyone outside of you. Offering that subtle nod that says, you're good now, you're acceptable, you're finally okay. That's the trap. And most of us didn't just fall into it. We were led there. From an early age, we were rewarded for compliance, not self-awareness. A gold star for being quiet. A pat on the back for blending in. Applause for following rules. Even when those rules chipped away at who we really were. Little by little, we learned. Your value lives in someone else's hands. Your worth becomes something you chase. Through likes, through compliments, through applause. From people who barely know you. And sometimes don't even know themselves. And the most dangerous part? You start to believe it. You start outsourcing your identity, your self-worth, to opinions that shift with the wind. But Aristotle warned us long ago. The worst form of inequality is to try to make unequal things equal. And what's more unequal than trying to measure your internal value with someone else's ever-changing external approval? That's a losing game. Because people change. Opinions change. Crowds cheer today, and turn their backs tomorrow. If your sense of self rises and falls with someone else's mood, with how many claps you get, with whether or not you're accepted today, then you'll live your whole life on shaky ground, swaying with every breeze, never rooted, never free. But there's another version of you. One that doesn't beg for applause. One that doesn't shrink to keep things calm. One that doesn't wait for permission to be real. This version of you? She's strong. He's grounded. They're steady. They don't need to be liked to be powerful. They don't trade authenticity for acceptance. And when that version wakes up, when it stops waiting and starts leading from within, you begin to feel something you may not have felt in a long time, ownership of your own worth. And that moment, that awakening, is exactly what we'll uncover. And when that grounded version of you rises, everything shifts. Think about the strongest people you've ever encountered. Not the loudest ones. Not the ones with the flashiest titles or the biggest followings. I mean the real ones. The people who walk into a room and don't have to say a word, because their energy already says everything. They carry themselves with a quiet power, not because they're trying to prove anything, but because their worth isn't even a question. It's already decided. You see it in the way they speak with calm certainty. In the way they set and hold boundaries, without guilt. In the way they walk away from things that feel misaligned. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. That kind of strength, it's not handed to them. It's claimed. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once said, "It never ceases to amaze me, we all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." Isn't that wild? We spend so much of our lives worrying about being liked, that we forget how to be true. And here's the tricky thing. Being liked is a moving target. Today, you're too loud. Tomorrow, too quiet. You adjust, shrink, apologize, and still feel hollow. Because applause may be loud, but it's never lasting. It fades fast. And if external approval is your fuel, you'll always be chasing something that vanishes the second you stop performing. Real power? It's quiet. It doesn't need spotlight or validation. It doesn't need a crowd to feel complete. It just is. So next time you catch yourself about to apologize for existing, for taking up space, for expressing a truth that someone else might not like, pause. Catch it. Instead of saying "I'm sorry," try saying "thank you." Or better yet, say nothing at all. Let your presence speak. Let your energy fill the space unapologetically. Because your worth? It's not up for negotiation. It never was. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become that? If you're constantly shape-shifting into who the world wants you to be? Let this be your reminder. You don't need to dim your light to fit in. You don't need to tone yourself down to be accepted. You don't need permission to feel proud of how far you've come. And you certainly don't need a flurry of likes to confirm you matter. You already matter. And yes, it's hard. Especially for those of us who were raised to be nice. To be agreeable. To believe that keeping the peace is the same as being strong. But here's the truth most people won't tell you. People will take whatever you let them. Not necessarily because they're cruel. Or because they want to hurt you. So why do people take more than they should? Not because they're villains. Not because they're cruel. But simply because they're human. We all respond to what's available. To what's allowed. To the unspoken patterns people set. And if you keep handing out pieces of yourself, your time, your energy, your emotional presence, without limits, without pause, without question, then it's no surprise if you eventually wake up feeling completely drained. Empty. Detached from your own center. But that's not because you're weak. It's because your boundaries were never meant to be open-ended. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're not cold walls designed to push people away or shut them out. They're filters. Boundaries are how you choose what gets to stay in your life. And what doesn't. What lifts your energy. And what quietly drains it. What brings you closer to peace. And what pulls you back into chaos. Imagine boundaries as spiritual bouncers. They stand at the doors of your mind, your heart, your calendar, protecting what matters most. Your time. Your attention. Your emotional clarity. Your peace. The Stoics didn't use the modern word boundaries. But they absolutely understood the principle. They talked about it through the lens of control. What's in your control, and what isn't? Epictetus said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances. But we can always choose how we respond to them. And one of the most powerful ways you can respond is by learning what not to allow into your space. What not to absorb. What not to entertain. That's the entire point of boundaries. Not to control other people. But to stay in control of yourself. To protect the part of you that knows your capacity. That knows your truth. That knows when enough is enough. Ever notice how deeply drained you feel? After saying yes to something you never wanted to do? Something that didn't align, didn't feel right, didn't serve you? That's not just emotional exhaustion. That's energetic debt. Every time you override your own needs to make someone else comfortable. Every time you say yes while your gut is begging for no. You don't just lose time. You lose trust in yourself. And that debt accumulates. Until one day, you don't even recognize how much you've given away just to keep things peaceful on the outside. While chaos brews quietly within. But there's another way, and the truth is, every time you abandon your boundary, every time you say yes when your body says no, you don't just lose time. You pay with your peace. And the cost? It adds up. It compounds. Like interest on a loan you never agreed to. That kind of emotional debt doesn't just vanish. It shows up, quietly, then all at once. As burnout. As resentment toward people you once loved showing up for. As anxiety that has no name, but always seems to linger. And worst of all, as a slow disconnection from yourself. But something powerful happens the moment you stop the cycle. The moment you start saying no, clearly, calmly, without over-explaining. When you stop attaching a 10-minute apology to every personal limit. When you stop guilt-tripping yourself into exhaustion just to avoid disappointing someone else. At first, people may resist. Especially those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They might not like it. They might push back. But eventually, they'll feel it. And whether they like it or not, they'll respect it. But more importantly, you'll respect it. Because holding your boundaries isn't about controlling others. It's about finally honoring yourself. Aristotle said, "The more you know, the more you know you don't know." And nowhere is that wisdom more necessary than in relationships. Because one of the clearest signs of maturity, of emotional intelligence, of self-respect, is knowing exactly where you end, and someone else begins. Boundaries make that clear. They define what's truly yours to carry, and what never was. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole, of integrating all the parts of you that were hidden, silenced, or sacrificed. And a crucial step in that process, reclaiming what you gave away to please others. Your time, your peace, your silence, your space. Jung also believed something profound. That when we don't own our boundaries consciously, they show up unconsciously. And often painfully. In broken relationships. In chronic exhaustion. In the quiet ache of emotional burnout. So here's a challenge. One that's simple, but not always easy. This week, say no. To something. Big or small. Say it without a long speech. Without guilt. Without asking for permission. Then sit in the discomfort. Let the moment pass. And afterward, take note. What's still there? You. More grounded. More honest. More in control. Because protecting your peace? That's not selfish. It's strategic, it's not rude. It's necessary because you cannot keep pouring into others. If you're constantly leaking, so if you can't keep pouring from an empty cup, what do you actually fill it with? Start here. You can't live a life of depth, peace, and meaning if every day is spent managing someone else's expectations. You can't be grounded if you're always performing. You can't lead yourself if you're always asking for directions from people who aren't even walking your path. Socrates once said, "Be as you wish to seem." In other words, don't just look strong. Be strong. Don't just perform confidence, live it from the inside out. And if you want to be respected, start by respecting your own boundaries first. Let people feel your no. Let them bump into your limits. Let them learn, not through explanation, but through action, that you're no longer available for anything that costs you your peace. And most importantly, let yourself feel what it's like to finally choose you. But here's the thing no one likes to admit. Letting go sounds simple. It's not. It's one of the hardest things most of us will ever do. Not because we don't know something has run its course. Not because we're unclear. But because we've wrapped our identity around it. The job that drains you but gave you a title. The friendship that only flows one way, but feels like history. The habit that pulls you back into cycles of regret, but feels safer than change. Even the past versions of yourself. The ones that helped you survive once, but now only hold you small. Hold you stuck. We hold on. Not because it still fits, but because it feels familiar. And here's a truth many avoid. Not everything broken needs fixing. Some things aren't meant to be mended. They're meant to be released. The longer you try to resuscitate what's already done, the longer you block the energy meant for your next chapter, the sooner you let go, the sooner you live. The Stoics knew this. They were clear, even ruthless, about what truly mattered. Marcus Aurelius said, "Ask yourself at every moment." So what was Marcus Aurelius really asking when he said, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" Not just your tasks, not just your habits, but your attachments. That includes the things you've convinced yourself you need, because they've been part of your identity for so long. But if something is constantly taking more than it gives, if it costs you your peace, your clarity, your self-respect, or even just your sleep, then it's not helping you evolve. It's holding you back. No amount of explaining, defending, justifying, or waiting it out will change that. Carl Jung once wrote, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning." In other words, the strategies that once worked, the relationships that once felt like home, the roles that once gave you meaning, they may no longer fit the person you're becoming. Growth demands shedding. And sometimes, what must be shed is something sacred to who you used to be. That's what makes letting go so complex. Because letting go doesn't just feel like change. It feels like death. Like something inside you is being pulled out by the root. And in a way, it is. But here's the paradox. You're not really losing anything. You're releasing what's already gone. What you were clinging to wasn't a person. It wasn't a job. It wasn't even a relationship or a dream. You were holding on to the idea of it. The memory. The version of it that existed once, but no longer does. You weren't holding something real. You were holding a ghost. And the truth is, ghosts can't feed the living. Real power isn't in clinging harder. It's in knowing when to stop. Knowing when to quit. Not because you've given up, but because you've finally woken up. You've stopped trying to force something to make sense. That no longer does. You've realized that choosing peace over persistence isn't failure. It's freedom. Socrates once said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new." That's the key. When you stop wasting energy trying to repair what isn't yours anymore, you start creating something that is. A life rooted in clarity, not confusion. In truth, not nostalgia. In love, not fear. So ask yourself, honestly, gently, without shame, what am I still holding on to out of fear, not love? Maybe it's a role you've outgrown. Maybe it's a relationship that once felt warm, but now only weighs you down. So maybe it's not just a job you've outgrown, or a relationship that's run its course. Maybe it's a version of yourself you no longer recognize. The one who kept saying yes when you meant no. The one who stayed quiet to keep others comfortable. The one who became so good at surviving. You forgot what it felt like to live. It's time to let that version go. Not with drama. Not with a grand speech or a sudden exit. Just one symbolic step. Write it down, and burn it. Speak it aloud, alone, with no one listening. Cancel that plan you never wanted to make in the first place. Do something small, something intentional. That tells the universe, I'm ready to release what no longer reflects me. Because when you begin to shed that dead weight, that outdated energy, something incredible happens. You breathe deeper. You feel lighter. You move through life with less resistance. And slowly, you realize, you were never stuck. You were just surrounded by people, roles, and habits that no longer matched your frequency. Plato once wrote, the beginning is the most important part of the work. And sometimes, that beginning? It doesn't start with addition. It starts with subtraction. With removing what no longer fits. So that the truth of who you are has room to rise. Letting go doesn't make you weak. It means you've finally decided to stop settling. It means you're done living a version of life crafted by fear, approval, or outdated identity. And that decision, to let go of what's easy, in favor of what's real, that's the true beginning of your power. There's something quietly heartbreaking about spending your entire life trying to be what others accept, only to realize, too late, you never actually got to be yourself. And the wild part? Most people don't do it because they want to. They do it because the fear of judgment feels heavier than the weight of regret. So they shrink. They edit. They water themselves down, just enough to stay invisible, in plain sight. But here's the truth. You weren't born to blend in. You weren't sent here to become an echo in a sea of noise. You came here to bring something specific. Something unrepeatable. A voice, a presence, a light that only you can carry. And the more you deny it, the more drained you feel. Not because you're failing, but because you're hiding. Socrates once said, to find yourself, think for yourself. So what happens when you finally stop hiding? When you start thinking for yourself, living for yourself? Something shifts. Because until then, you've been quietly outsourcing your identity. Handing pieces of it to trends, expectations, approval, and applause. And in doing so, you trade something irreplaceable. Your authenticity, for comfort. Comfort feels safe. But it will never make you whole. Because pretending? It's not neutral. It's exhausting. It's a slow, steady leak of energy that drains you day after day. No matter how many hours you sleep. No matter how many vacations you take. No matter how many smiles you fake. Wearing a mask, especially for long stretches of your life, requires constant monitoring. Constant adjusting. Constant questioning. You start living in a state of low-grade anxiety. Wondering if who you are underneath is even allowed to exist. And eventually, the quiet question creeps in. Would people still accept me if they met the real me? Here's the twist. Your truth is magnetic. No, not everyone will like it. Not everyone will applaud it. And that's the point. Your authenticity was never meant to be for everyone. It's not designed for mass approval. It's a frequency. A filter. It calls in the ones who are aligned with who you truly are, and gently clears out the ones who were never meant to stay. You're not here to be universally accepted. You're here to be unmistakably you. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you were told to be. Not the image you curated for acceptance. Not the watered-down version shaped by fear. But you. Unedited. Unapologetic. True." And when you finally step into that version of yourself, when you stop explaining, softening, diluting your essence just to be palatable, something incredible happens. Life begins to align. The right people find you. The right opportunities show up. You stop chasing. You start attracting. You stop performing. You start living. You don't have to be loud to be real. You don't need to shout to be seen. You just need to be consistent. Say what you mean. Stand by it. Live like you are the one who has to carry the weight of your own choices. Because you are. And when that inner alignment locks in, when your actions, words, and values finally agree, it changes everything. It changes the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you move through rooms. Not with arrogance, but with clarity. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." But before you can ever use your power, you have to own it, because here's the truth. You can't own what you keep hiding. You can't step into your power if you're still editing yourself for the comfort of people who were never meant to understand you. So here's your challenge. Not someday. Not next year. This week. Post something that is 100% you. Wear the outfit you love. Even if it's too much. Even if it turns heads. Say the thing you've been holding in for too long. Even if your voice shakes. Not because you want to make a scene. Not for drama. But because it's time. Time to stop ghosting your own life. You weren't born to be tolerated. You weren't placed here to stay muted and edited. You were made to be true. And that version of you, the one who doesn't flinch when they're being real, who doesn't ask for permission to exist in full color, that's the version the world needs most. Let's be honest, life doesn't pull punches. It hits hard. It knocks everyone down at some point. Maybe it was betrayal that left you questioning whether trust is even safe. Maybe it was loss that hollowed out your sense of stability. Maybe it was failure that landed harder than anyone, including you, expected. But here's what most people miss. Pain doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes it's just where the real story begins. You've heard the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But that's not automatically true. It only strengthens you if you choose to let it. Because not everyone who breaks gets back up wiser. Some stay stuck. Some remain bitter. Others, they rise. Not because they avoided pain, but because they transformed it. They didn't run from the fire. They let it refine them. They didn't bury the wound. They turned it into wisdom. The Stoics had a name for this kind of transformation. Amor fati, love of fate. It means choosing to love everything that happens to you. Not just the wins, but the losses. Not just the joy, but the grief. Not just the ease, but the adversity. Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, the obstacle isn't a detour. It is the path. And Carl Jung echoed this same truth when he said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. So don't run from the hard parts. Don't numb them. Don't deny them. Let them shape you. Let them carve something steady and sacred within you. Let them build a version of you that doesn't need applause, approval, or perfection. Just truth. This is your turning point. Not because everything suddenly gets easy, but because you stop waiting for it to. You're not here to perform. You're not here to survive. You're here to live, fully, consciously, powerfully. You're ready now. Not because life got easier, but because you finally stopped hiding from what shaped you. And when you really sit with your story, you begin to see the design in even the darkest chapters. Because as hard as it is to accept, suffering has a purpose. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that pain isn't just something to endure. It's something that invites us inward. To confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid. To meet the shadows we've buried under years of busyness and approval. Because when everything is easy, we don't question. We don't reflect. We coast. But when life cracks us open, when we fall, that's when we finally look within. The wound becomes the doorway. The scar becomes the map. Think of the strongest people you know. Not just physically tough, but emotionally wise, self-aware, grounded. They didn't get there by dodging pain. They got there by walking through it. By sitting with it. By letting it teach them. By integrating it into who they became. They didn't just go through hard things. They grew through them. Because pain, when you stop fighting it, when you allow it to refine you, sharpens everything. It makes your insight deeper. Your boundaries firmer. Your voice clearer. Your decisions more deliberate. Pain teaches you what truly matters. What's worth your time? Who's worth your energy? And what you'll never compromise on again. Socrates said, "The soul is dyed the color of its thoughts." And in your hardest moments, those thoughts get louder, more powerful, more revealing. You get to choose. Will this pain make me bitter, or better? Will I close myself off? Or will I rise more open, more intentional, more free? Here's something powerful you can do. Reflect on a moment that shattered you. A moment that cracked you open and brought you to your knees. Not from a place of blame. Not to relive it, but to understand it. Ask yourself, gently but honestly, what did that pain teach me? How did it reshape the way I walk through this world? What did it burn away? And what did it build in me? Because every scar carries a lesson. Not to trap you in the past, but to remind you of your capacity to move forward. To live deeper. This is what you've survived. This is what you've outgrown. This is the shape it carved in you. Not to weaken you, but to prepare you. Plato once wrote, "Pain restores order." He believed that through struggle, we remember who we are. We stop chasing the noise. We return to what's real. So don't run from the past. Don't numb it. Don't silence it. Let it speak. Let it guide you. Let it remind you. You didn't just survive. You transformed. And that's the beginning of everything. So when pain speaks, let it. Let it shape you. But never let it define you. Because every wound you've faced, every scar you carry, has also gifted you something invaluable. A lesson, a compass, a deep layer of strength. And that's your power source. Not something outside of you. It's already in you. You just have to stop running long enough to tap into it. There's a kind of power that most people miss. Because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need volume. It doesn't crave dominance. It doesn't posture, perform, or compete. It walks in quietly. Speaks less. And somehow, just by being there, it shifts the entire atmosphere. That kind of power doesn't come from being the loudest in the room. It comes from not needing the room at all. Because real power, it doesn't roar. Sometimes, it whispers, "I'm good, either way." It's the calm in the chaos. The steady breath in the heat of conflict. The quiet presence that doesn't flinch when things get messy. When things fall apart. When everything feels like too much. That's the power that lasts. That doesn't burn hot and fast, but burns deep and steady. And here's the secret. That kind of power is built. Not borrowed. Not gifted. Grown. Grown through discipline. Through daily self-awareness. Through the uncomfortable choice to sit with your emotions instead of react to them. Through the refusal to let your ego run the show. The Stoics lived this truth. They didn't just preach it. They embodied it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That is power. Not the ability to control the world, but the ability to control how it moves through you. So whatever you're walking through right now, remember this. You don't need to roar. You don't need to prove. You just need to return to yourself. Steady, clear, present. Because that's where the real power has always been. And that kind of steady presence, that quiet power, it begins with one realization. You are the gatekeeper. You decide what gets in. You decide what gets to stay. You decide what has permission to shake your peace, and what doesn't. But most people never realize this. They live in a constant state of reaction. One bad comment ruins their whole day. One rejection and they spiral. One moment of tension and they either explode or collapse. They ride emotional roller coasters, pulled up and down by drama, conflict, or attention. They live off highs and lows, like emotional adrenaline junkies, always needing something to push against, just to feel alive. But let's be honest. That's not power. That's instability, dressed up as passion. That's chaos, wearing the mask of intensity. Because real power doesn't chase the storm. It becomes the eye of it. When you stop seeking friction. When you no longer feel the need to control every outcome. Or jump into every disagreement. Something extraordinary happens. You become rare. You become a walking sanctuary. A presence that people feel. Not because you demand attention, but because you no longer need it. People sense it in your tone, in your timing, in your ability to be fully present, without putting on a performance. You don't just walk into a room. You calm it. You don't just speak. You hold space. And ironically, that's what draws people in. Not your volume. Not your certainty. But your stillness. Carl Jung once said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." And it's true. But once you have walked through your own inner fire, once you've learned to face your chaos, without letting it consume you, you become unshakable. You don't suppress your emotions. You steward them. You don't fight to be right. You choose peace over performance. You stop swinging at every shadow, and start standing in your light. And think of the most grounded people you know. We'll finish that thought together, in the final page. Think of the most grounded person you know. The one who listens more than they speak. The one who doesn't argue just to be right. The one who doesn't rise to every insult, or collapse at every challenge. The one who keeps their dignity, even when everything around them is falling apart. That is timeless power. It doesn't age. It doesn't fade when trends shift. And it doesn't burn out. Because it's not fueled by ego or external validation. It's fueled by something much deeper. Inner alignment. Socrates once said, "He who is not contented with what he has, would not be contented with what he would like to have." And that's where everything flips. Because once you're grounded within yourself, once you're anchored by clarity instead of approval, you stop being easily shaken by what happens around you. You don't need everyone to like you. You don't panic at rejection. You don't chase closure or explanations. You can face discomfort. You can sit with silence. You can feel the sting of disappointment. And still stay centered. You no longer have to prove anything. Because you know who you are. So the next time you feel triggered by a comment, a pause, a look, a loss, pause. Don't react out of habit. Don't respond from adrenaline. Breathe. Slow everything down. And ask yourself, is this my peace speaking, or my pride? Because the strongest person in the room is rarely the one who demands attention. It's the one who doesn't need to. It's the one who understands That not every storm needs their thunder. That silence isn't weakness, it's presence. That restraint isn't fear, it's focus. And that not every battle is theirs to fight. Some are meant to be walked away from. Some are meant to teach, not trap. Some are simply there to remind you of how far you've come. Because true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. And now, you know, that strength is already in you. It always has been. You just had to stop running long enough to remember. To come home to your own voice. To stop performing and start living. Not louder, but truer. Not faster, but deeper. Not to be accepted, but to be whole. And that is your power. Unshakable. Unmistakable. And entirely your own. And when you finally learn to pause, to ask whether something truly deserves your reaction, you begin to reclaim your energy. Because not everything is worth your time. Not every battle deserves your fire. And not everyone is worth the emotional rent you've been paying in silence. That's the kind of power that lasts. Quiet, steady, still, and utterly undeniable. It doesn't shout. It doesn't seek attention. But it's felt. It's known. And the best part? It's already within you. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to chase it. You just have to choose it, over noise. Over distraction. Over approval. Over habits that keep you small. You don't need to chase power. You simply need to stop giving yours away. In pieces. In apologies. In the small, silent ways you say yes when you mean no. Everything you need to be grounded, clear, and unshakable is already in you. You're not here to blend in. You're not here to shrink or fade. You're here to stand firm. Live true. And walk with a quiet strength that speaks without a word. And if something in these words stirred something in you, if it reminded you of who you've always been beneath the noise, there's another video waiting for you. It's on the screen now. And it'll take you even deeper into this journey. Watch it when you're ready. And thank you for being part of Stoic Insights. This is the space where we trade noise for clarity. Where we choose substance over spectacle. Where we stop performing and start becoming. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be seen to be strong, because real strength doesn't perform. It endures. It guides. It becomes part of who you are. The Stoics didn't chase power. They became it, by mastering themselves. So, take the keys. Use them in silence. In private. Where it matters most, when no one is watching. That's when true power is forged. Master yourself. Own your mind. That's timeless power. Subscribe to Stoic Insights.